Hello everyone, welcome to our Egyptian online seminar group. First, keep your microphones off, and then if you have any questions, you can ask our speakers after her presentation. I have great pleasure of welcoming Dr. Meredith Tharapos. First, let me introduce her in a few seconds. Dr. Meredith Tharapos is a senior lecturer and the undergraduate program manager in the Department of Accounting at RMIT University. She has over 20 years experience teaching in university within Melbourne and with RMIT International Partner in Asia. Meredith's research is broadly considered with behavioral issues within the field of accounting and includes educational and culture and accountability aspects. Meredith has had the honor of receiving a number of teaching excellence awards. Meredith is also an active member of the accounting education community. Her roles, which serve to drive enhanced impact in accounting education research and innovations in Asia Pacific regions, including Coven of the annual RMIT Accounting Educators Conference, accounting members of Accounting and Finance Associations of Australia and New Zealand, Accounting Education Special Interest Group. Now we will start our seminar with Dr. Meredith Tharapos.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for your very, very kind invitation to present today. I'm honored to be part of your online seminar. I can hear a little bit of feedback. Is that feedback coming? That's better. Yes, and thank you, Mohammed. I'm very honored to be part of the online series that you've got running, and it looks like you've had a fabulous lineup of presenters. So I'm honored to be included in today's presentation. So thank you once again for the invitation. I'll just share my screen to share my slides. So hopefully that's coming forward in full view for you. So I'm presenting today on my paper, which is looking at the research that I did examined accounting academics and their level of cultural intelligence. And I was just explaining to Mohammed that I really enjoyed teaching accounting. So I have a great interest in accounting. I'm also very, very interested in culture. And love traveling in better times were it not for COVID travel restrictions. But this piece of research, this study that I did, enabled me to combine my two passions of education and culture. So that's a little bit of background behind the study. As a result of globalisation is a reality that's impacting businesses, multinational corporations, and of course, educational institutions. And if we put some numbers behind that, international students contributed 22.6 billion pounds to the UK economy in 2015-16. They're the latest data coming out of London Economics, and $39 billion to the US economy. In terms of Australia, education is Australia's largest service export, and it generates about 30.3 billion Australian dollars in 2017. The bulk of that, 20.7 billion, relates to higher education. So we're certainly very, very globally connected in higher education. And I think as today's global world becomes more complex, and interconnected, those broader societal trends and influences influence the geographical mix within our classrooms and the manner in which students, academics, and universities interact with each other and the world. So it's important that we get this right. And it will come as no surprise to you to learn that universities are among the world's most culturally diverse organisations. And if you consider the level of cultural diversity amongst students in your classroom, particularly here in Australia, we have a lot of students from Southeast Asia. So we will have students from China, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, primarily, and then to a lesser extent, students from other parts of the world. If you think about, we have very culturally diverse colleagues at our university, and if you think about the diversity amongst colleagues that you undertake research with, and just simply attending this research seminar, you can see that we interact with an enormous amount of cultural diversity across the various aspects of our roles and jobs. Just to give you some idea of the diversity amongst academic staff in the Department of Accounting at RMIT, I've pinned the countries of origin from where they come from. Now, there's more than one academic coming from each of these countries. This is just simply looking at the number of countries, not the number of academics. And you can see that predominantly the accounting academics at RMIT have been born in Southeast Asia, but we do have academics who originated from Kenya, from Italy, from the UK, from Russia, and Iran, Pakistan, and New Zealand, of course, being our closest neighbours. So it just gives you some idea of the extent of diversity within the Department of Accounting at RMIT. When you look at what's happening within the classroom, we've got some data around the Australian situation, in that there was a 500% increase in the number of international students who completed an accounting undergrad degree at an Australian university between 2001 and 2012. Obviously, the current COVID-19 situation has impacted students being able to physically be in Australia and attend classes. But of course, we've moved to online delivery for this semester. So they're joining into our classrooms, into our online classes from their homes around the world, wherever they may be at this point in time. As a result, the levels of cultural diversity that we have in the classroom create potential for a very, very rich conversation with our students, and a whole, when you consider the breadth of experience that they bring. And so when you're discussing things like ethical considerations, that can mean different things to different cultures. And so you could get a very, very rich conversation when you start bringing in more, what does ethics look like in different cultures? But on the other hand, it has the potential to create conflict, misinterpretation, and marginalisation. And so as a result, we've got a number of challenges regarding, say, the different pedagogical methodologies employed and what they've experienced in the past before they get to our higher education classrooms. Differences, challenges regarding the nature of assessment, different expectations around the role of the educator. And we as educators have different expectations around the role of our students and their responsibilities. We've got different language standards within the classroom and differing assumed prior knowledge and capabilities. So all of this can lead to lots of challenges being experienced, not only for educators, but also for our students. And as a result, academics are increasingly required to possess cross-cultural skills. Now, what's really interesting about this is that some academics seem to move comfortably across cultural boundaries and have no problems at all. It doesn't matter which cultural background that the student has, they seem to adapt and be able to address and understand the student's needs and expectations. On the other hand, other academics seem to struggle with complexities involved and have great difficulties navigating the cultural aspects and the diversity that students can bring to the classroom. Now, what has emerged as an important factor in business literature is what we call, or what is known as, cultural intelligence. Now, what is cultural intelligence? It was conceptualized by Ely and Ung in 2003, so it's still relatively new. And it's grounded in the multiple loci of intelligence theory. So you may have heard, you'll be familiar with IQ, general intelligence, and in more recent times, emotional intelligence. Things like social intelligence, practical intelligence. They're all interrelated and sit in this multiple loci of intelligence theory. In terms of cultural intelligence, it's defined as the capability of an individual to function effectively in situations characterized by cultural diversity. So it's essentially looking at and picking up where emotional intelligence leaves off, in that emotional intelligence is utilized or exists in familiar cultural situations, whereas cultural intelligence, or CQ, it extends EQ and takes it into the culturally diverse situations that are unfamiliar. Cultural intelligence has 4 interrelated components: metacognitive CQ, cognitive CQ, motivational CQ, and behavioral CQ. And I'll explain what each of those mean in a moment. It also is measured using the 20-item cultural intelligence scale, known as the CQS, and I'll explain that in a moment as well. So firstly, the 4 interrelated components of cultural intelligence. So firstly, metacognitive CQ. Metacognitive CQ. Yes.
I'm sorry for interruption. I think the slides don't move now. Are you in slide number 1?
Oh, thank you. They're not moving. Let me just. Oh, is that moved now? Has that moved, Mohammed? No? Yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yes.
Yes, no, it's okay.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you for, my apologies. So I'll just take you through that. That was the first slide.
Thanks.
That's the cultural diversity slide that I was talking to.
Okay.
There's the country of origin from accounting academics at RMIT that I was referring to. So you can see that they come from different parts of the world, you know, primarily here in Southeast Asia, but also Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, we've got Kenya, Italy, UK, Russia, and even New Zealand over here. So that's where I was discussing the increase in the number of international students and the potential for the richness and breadth of experience that we can have within the classroom, particularly conversations I find around ethics and what that looks like in different cultures. And then the other side is that it can create the potential for conflict misinterpretation and marginalisation, and the challenges associated with that I would listed. So increasingly, academics are required to possess cross-cultural skills, and some seem to navigate that process quite comfortably and can move easily across the different cultures within a culturally diverse situation. Others struggle enormously with the complexities. So what's emerged as being an important factor is cultural intelligence. And there's the definition. So defined as the capability of an individual to function effectively in situations characterized by cultural diversity. And we've got the 4 interrelated components. So metacognitive CQ, cognitive CQ, motivational CQ, and behavioral CQ. And it's measured by the 20-item cultural intelligence scale. So here's the point at which we're up to, and I do apologise. I was clicking on the wrong slides. I've got 2 screens, and it was the other screen that it was moving, but not the one that was being shared. So apologies there. So metacognitive CQ, what is that? It's concerned with analysing one's own thought process to understand and solve problems when faced with a different cultural situation. So it's very much about making sense of culturally diverse situations. If we move to cognitive CQ, it's knowledge of the cultural norms, values, practices, and conventions associated with different societies, along with their differences that have been acquired through education and personal experiences. And if we consider traditional sort of cultural diversity training, it will largely focus on just this aspect, just what's different in different cultures and in what are the norms and the values and systems. That tends to be centered only on the cognitive CQ area. The next component is motivational CQ, and this refers to an individual's level of interest, drive, and energy to focus, to function and interact effectively in culturally diverse situations and to persevere through the inevitable challenges and conflicts. Behavioural CQ, and this is probably the one that's most obvious to an outsider. And because it's, oh, what happened there? Sorry. It's, the slides have gone, just get them back. Oops. I'll just stop sharing them for a moment and we'll get the slides back.
Okay, no problem, bro.
Did you see them flying away on me?
Yeah.
There we go. Are they showing now?
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Yes. But increase to full screen. There. Is that showing full screen now?
Fantastic.
Yeah, very good.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure what happened there. But behavioural CQ refers to an individual's ability to enact a wide range of behaviours when dealing with people from different cultures. And it includes verbal behaviour, so things like accent, tone, expressiveness, non-verbal, so body language, gestures, facial expressions, and speech acts, the exact words and phrases that are used. Now, what's important here is that to note that all the 4 components are of equal importance and that they're interrelated. Now, for the accountants among us, CQ has been identified as a very, very important and critical capability by the chairman of PwC the Americas. So it is increasingly being picked up and made a very important part of training and skilling employees up by major multinational corporations in particular, along with a lot of universities as well. Now, turning to the measurement instrument. So the measurement instrument associated with CQ is called the Cultural Intelligence Scale, and there's 20 items there. So 4 of the items relate to metacognitive CQ, 6 items relate to cognitive CQ, and 5 items relate to each of motivational CQ and behavioral CQ. And some of the sample items there, so with metacognitive CQ, one of the items is I'm conscious of the cultural knowledge I use when interacting with people from different cultural backgrounds. With cognitive CQ, I know the legal and economic systems of other cultures. Motivational CQ, I enjoy interacting with people from different cultures. And finally, behavioral CQ, I can change my verbal behavior, so accent, tone, when a cross-cultural interaction requires it. So there's some examples of some of the items. There's a 7-point Likert scale to indicate the extent to which each item reflects the respondent's capabilities. So 1 is strongly disagree, through to 7, which is strongly agree. And that instrument has been validated and found to be reliable across cultures, across time, and across different situations. So in terms of the research done to date, a lot of research around particularly antecedents and outcomes, but in particular, looking at emotional intelligence and social intelligence, CQ has been found to be related but distinct from both of those items. It's also found to be a predictor of performance in intercultural settings over and above EQ. So again, the cultural intelligence fits in within that multiple loci of intelligence, but it is related but distinct. In terms of the research around the outcomes of CQ, CQ has been found to be a predictor of a wide range of cognitive, psychological and behavioural outcomes, such as global leadership performance and cultural adjustment, particularly in the context of expatriates working in different countries. In terms of the research surrounding antecedents, the antecedents that have been looked at have been things like personality traits, international work experience, international non-work experience, so private travel, educational experience, participation in cross-cultural programs and intercultural contact. Where this study fits in is around international work experience and just examining that a little bit further. The bulk of the studies looking at antecedents have examined international experience, but the measures that they've used to capture international experience have been largely confined to things like number of international experiences and some attempts to capture the length of short-term international experience. And this has resulted in mixed findings. So what the aim of my study was to examine the levels of CQ, or cultural intelligence, of Australian accounting academics, and to look at the demographic and other factors that might help explain differences in their levels of CQ, and also to further investigate international experience in the area of cultural distance and diversity of experience. So that was the aim of the study. We utilised a the accounting discipline. Why? Because accounting has been significantly impacted by the large number of international students studying around the world. And the accounting discipline has historically been at the forefront of teaching offshore, with a number of universities having partnerships with international universities where they send academics from the host country from the awarding institution to the host country to teach internationally. And so why the findings from this study have relevance beyond Australia and the accounting discipline, as the issues of cultural diversity are by no means unique to the Australian accounting academic setting. The findings are applicable to situations beyond accounting and elsewhere in the world. So what did we do? We distributed a survey online to all full-time accounting academics listed on Australian universities' sites. We excluded adjunct professors, emeritus professors, research fellows, sessional staff and doctoral students. Reason being, adjunct professors sometimes work for more than one university, as do emeritus professors. Sessional staff are often hard to pin down and come and go, and often work for a number of different universities. So we limited our study just to full-time academics that were listed on Australian university websites. So it's important to note that these academics were not necessarily academics born in Australia, but rather academics teaching accounting full-time, employed at Australian universities. This gave us we identified a total population size of 771 accounting academics from the 39 universities in Australia. Of that population, we were not able to obtain email addresses online for one university, which had 7 academics. And we received auto replies back from 19 academics indicating that they were on extended leave, usually on sabbatical in other countries. So we excluded them and reduced the population down to 745. We received a total of 253 completed responses, giving us a response rate of 34%. So how did we compare? We'll look at our results in terms of the CQS items, and we'll also compare the CQ scores for accounting academics with the results from other studies. So here's the results for Australian accounting academics, their average CQ scores. And you can see that it was cognitive CQ that recorded the lowest mean and also the highest standard deviation. Now, when you consider that cognitive CQ informs the knowledge of cultural norms and values and standards, if accounting academics are recording lower levels of CQ in this particular component, then potentially it's going to impact their ability to create culturally appropriate strategies within the classroom and their ability to behave in a culturally appropriate way. So there's a little bit of concern around the results here. So what we decided to do was then compare the results that we got from our survey to the results reported in other surveys. Now, I know this is a little bit small, but you can see that the results reported for Australian accounting academics is coming in at number 7. So we're kind of sitting in the middle of these studies. Now, we selected these studies on the basis that they had published, that they had used the full 20-item CQS and that they had published both the mean and the standard deviation for all 4 components. Not all published studies had done that. So we selected the studies on the basis of those 2 things. So accounting academics ranked 7th in terms of total CQ and places them at about the midpoint in our sample of studies. And if you look at the cohorts involved, they're quite diverse. So you've got international school leaders, you've got expats working in Malaysia, you've got international university students, Turkish military personnel, US professional part-time MBA students, US team leaders, graduate students from Korea, and you've got students from New Zealand. And it would appear that the Australian accounting academics their results are lower than the other professional cohorts of school leaders, expats in Malaysia, the multicultural team members based in various other countries, and so on. So a little bit of concern there. One explanation that we came up with is that it is possible that these lower results occurred due to Australia's geographical isolation, in that respondents may not have or rarely travelled internationally. In our regression models, looking at international experience and what was important, what came through quite strongly in our regression model was teaching in Southeast Asia. What we did when we coded international teaching, we broke it down in terms of regional location. So we looked at international teaching in Southeast Asia, we looked at international teaching in Europe, and we looked at international teaching in other English-speaking countries such as the US, the UK, New Zealand, Canada. What was consistently positive and statistically significant in terms of relationships with total CQ and all 4 CQs was teaching in Southeast Asia. Teaching in other English-speaking countries or Europe was not significant. The other thing that was significant in our model was those who had resided overseas for a continuous period greater than 12 months. They had higher levels of CQ. So what was really, really interesting there was teaching internationally in Southeast Asia. It's often short-term, it's intensive, but despite the short-term nature of that style of teaching, it was found to be associated with higher levels of CQ. I've done further qualitative studies to further unpack that, but there, as a result of this quantitative study, but they were very, very interesting results and gave us an insight into the effects of cultural distance, because Southeast Asia, in terms of cultural distance, according to the Globe Studies and Hofstede, is at the far end of the spectrum in terms of Australia. Obviously, English-speaking countries such as the US, UK, Canada, New Zealand are closer in those aspects and dimensions in those studies. Even Europe, despite its multilinguistic and varied cultural backgrounds, was still not significant because it's culturally closer to Australia. But Southeast Asia is at the further end of the spectrum in that regard, and therefore this gave us new insights around the aspect of cultural distance. And also the other interesting result was residing overseas for a continuous period greater than 12 months. So it was that deeper immersion in a country. And if those of you who have maybe lived overseas for a period of time, it's quite different to traveling to another country. When you travel to another country on holiday or for a short work trip, you tend to stay in the hotel and you tend to, not interact so much with the locals at a greater and sustained level. But when you reside there for a period of time, and we defined that period of time as greater than 12 months, then it's a much deeper experience. The participants do tend to shop at local markets rather than just eating out all the time. You get to interact with the locals at a work level, in leisure activities to a far greater extent, and thereby learn a lot more about the culture. So in terms of our contribution to the literature for this paper, it increases our understanding of the antecedents that influence CQ levels in the area of international experience. Because what we've done is examine that potential impact of overseas teaching experiences and overseas residency. We've defined new measures associated with international experience. And in so doing, it captured the breadth and the depth of international experience, that of long-term overseas residency and cultural distance, more importantly. So the good news in all of this is that CQ is malleable. In other words, it can be improved. And how can you develop it over time? You can develop it over time through the intercultural experiences that you have with the people that you interact with on a daily basis, through travel and appropriate training. So I think it's a wonderful journey to be on in terms of increasing our ability to interact with people from culturally diverse backgrounds, and particularly as we become a lot more global. It's a necessary skill. If you want to know more about all of this, you can read our paper, and I've put the hyperlink in there. So other authors are Brendan O'Connell and Stephen Delaportis from RMIT, and Ilias Basadoides from the UK, University of Aston in the UK. So I've put the link there if you're interested, and I will be placing these slides in the chat box later. But thank you very much for allowing me to present my research in this area. I've included my email address there if anybody would like to email me about any queries or just to have a chat. I would be most interested in your responses. So I have included that there. But thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure presenting. And I believe that there's some questions, and I'll open it up to the floor to questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meredith Tharapos, for your contribution and effort. Right now, Dr. Meredith will answer your questions. If you have any questions, you can open the mic and ask your questions. Please, after asking your questions, close your mic, please. Yeah.
Hello, Muhammad.
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for this lovely presentation, Meredith, and thank you for accepting the invitation. Great chance to catch with you again. I do have one question. As you said, Australian University have a very diverse range of academic and even of students, international students. But let's talk about Middle East, North Africa, South Asia, Latin America. Most of the countries there, they just teach their own students. students from the same country. They also recruit academic from the same country. For example, in my university here in Jordan, we are all Jordanian teachers and we are all Jordanian students. So we can say it's a monoculture or closed culture context. Do you think in these contexts an exploration is worth, or and if I like replicate your research and use the same survey in this context, it will like generate some empirical evidence, will be of benefits to audience or benefits of researchers who are interested in CQ. And again, thank you for everything.
Thank you for your question, and that's a very interesting point that you raise. And I know that the survey has been utilized in Turkey. I'm not sure about the results in the Middle East, but certainly, if not, then that would be a very, very worthwhile contribution to the CQ area to examine it in the Middle East context. I think the results would be incredibly interesting in sort of a more closed or monocultural society, to see people's responses there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, I have one question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I just want to ask a question. At the beginning, you measured the 4 dimensions of culture in Australia through a questionnaire.
Yes.
However, when you start to compare it to other countries, you used other studies' results. However, from the titles of the results, because you didn't distribute the questionnaire to different academics in different countries, what I saw that you start to use different studies results, mean, median, and standard deviation. However, by looking to the names of the studies, some studies are completed by undergraduate teachers, not academics in accounting. So this diversity in the nature of the sample, how did you overcome the unhomogeneity in the variance of this sample to be able to generalize it through statistics? How you overcome this problem?
Thank you very much, and that's a very, very good question. Because there were no equivalent surveys anywhere else in accounting, or amongst accounting academics. So neither professional accounting or accounting academics were we able to find published studies. It's quite a new study in the accounting area. And so what we thought we will do is then just compare it to published studies out there. We recognize that the participants in these studies were very varied, and we just wanted to find out how our accounting academics were placed in relation to participants in other cohorts in other studies, albeit incredibly varied in terms of country, in terms of vocation, and so on. So it just gave us a rough idea, an interesting idea of how Australian accounting academics were doing in relation to the cohorts from other studies. But we make no further claims than that, other than to give us an approximate idea of how we stand in relation to the results of published studies elsewhere.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Meredith, do you think that the prior empirical evidence that you have presented in the table will be like a good data for meta-analysis on this issue?
Yes, and it certainly lends itself to further studies. And in the paper, we make a number of recommendations for further research. It would be lovely to extend the study to, say, accounting academics beyond Australia. It would be lovely to extend the study to we would like to extend the study to the accounting profession. So there are a number of ways in which this study can be extended in terms of the quantitative results. What I've done further to this is conducted a qualitative study whereby I have participants that are accounting academics teaching internationally, and I have conducted interviews with them. I've observed them teaching in a different cultural environment, as well as observed teaching them domestically within Australia. And I've conducted focus groups with their international students. So the results of those studies will be coming out in future papers soon, I hope. They're in the review process, but as you know, that can take quite a while these days. Yes, so that they have some interesting studies to find out what those accounting academics were doing while they were undertaking international teaching, and how that contributed to increasing their CQ levels. What came through, I'll give you a little teaser with the research, and what came through strongly was not so much the number of times that they taught internationally, but rather it was the quality of the experience. It was very much about the extent that they interacted with locals from the host culture, and that includes their students, chatting with the students, chatting with taxi drivers, chatting with the hospitality workers, because that increased their knowledge of the different culture within which they were operating.
Yeah, actually, when I read your paper months ago, a lot of ideas came to my mind. Many of future research ideas may be conducted based on your, your research. One of the idea was, as I remember, you just link it with the demographic data of the respondents. So might someone link it to, if he wants to study the CQ of the students, accounting students, he might link it to the learning style called theory as a latent variable. So yeah, thanks for the fruitful research.
Yes, and there is many possibilities for further research in this area. And when I put up the model for the studies that have been done, it kind of gives you an idea. You know, people have looked at the antecedents or the influences on CQ, and then people have looked at the CQ as a predictor of various things. So you can look at it from either aspect. There's quite a bit done, particularly in the management literature, around predictors of, say, international performance and global leadership, those sorts of aspects associated with management and leadership. So there's all possibilities. And I think as we begin to operate on a more global basis, but even recognizing that there are differences within the one country, like Australia is a very, very big country, and what happened, and I'm from Victoria down towards the bottom over on the east coast, and people from there can be quite different to people, say, in the north of Australia. And then we've got the Indigenous people within Australia who are very, very different again, each with their own distinct cultural backgrounds, which we as a nation have not respected, but are beginning to learn to respect a lot more, and are becoming more integrated in our attempts with our Indigenous nations and peoples. And as RMIT University has very much a policy around diversity and inclusion, and that includes not only cultural diversity, but you've got differences in age and religion, all kinds of things, and just incorporating that into the way that we behave towards people. Any other queries or questions?
Dear Prof. Hogg, you have any question? Dr. Abir?
Someone's written a very lovely long comment.
Oh, hello there. Hi, Meredith. This is Abir Hassan. I'm reader in accounting at UWS in Scotland.
Lovely to meet you. Hello.
Yeah, lovely to meet you. It's very, very, very interesting. Actually, the talk about the international students and the cultural intelligence. To be very honest, I think it might be worthwhile in the future to measure the performance of students who taught by international staff versus the student who taught by local staff, because of course international staff are always coming from kind of different background and different experience, etc. So they all have kind of rich information and rich knowledge coming back from their home country, and then they really kind of contributed to the accounting profession, because it seems that current generation always prefer to provide them with life examples. So yes, for example, it's one size fits all doesn't work with anything. So no. It's one of the topic I taught in one of the courses is about the external factor that companies face, and including this in integrated reporting, etc. So, yes, for example, the international culture and the legal, economic, or technological, all of these affecting the companies. So I'm always using the Walmart example. So Walmart, of course, a very, very successful company in America, and they expanded everywhere in America. They were successful, but when they moved to expand in emerging economies like Walmart Germany, like Brazil, like other countries, South Korea, they completely failed because of the culture. So there was a culture shock. They did not. So definitely businesses, they want to survive if they did not do their homework properly about the culture, because what fits or what is very good for Australian, for US, for UK, doesn't at all fit with other culture and other religious and other kind of background. So it's really very, very interesting topic, and all the best for future research. That's all.
Oh, thank you, Abir, and lovely to meet you. And you must have some interesting cultural stories that you.
Absolutely. Yes. I definitely will drop you an email just to have a chat or take it forward, because we can easily collect data from UK universities, or old versus new, or whatever, because of course the international students play a huge role in UK economy, and of course having international students in class. To be very honest, this is a very important point as well, because having international students in class is not only benefit the international students, it benefits also the home students. So the home students from Scotland, I have done very many survey just to see the opinion of the students on a course that I taught, and home students found having international students with them in class and involved with them in group work, etc., enriched their knowledge and enhanced their learning experience, which is very, very interesting. And I would really love to carry on in this area. So I will definitely, you will receive an email from me soon.
Oh, I look forward to receiving that. And you're absolutely right about the benefits to our domestic students, because as they enter the workforce, it is an increasingly global workforce that they are going into, and really we're preparing them for the world of work that they will enter into, because they will be working internationally.
Yes.
I grew up in a small country town in Victoria, and when I say small, I mean a town of 200 people, and we didn't even live in the town. We lived on the outside. So our neighbours were over a kilometre away. They were large, there was no international people there. So I didn't get to meet people from other cultures till I went to university in Melbourne. And that began my love of other cultures, and I've not stopped at the wonder of other cultures and learning. There's so much to learn from them. And, growing up in that small country town, I would not even envisage traveling internationally and nor living internationally. And we did live as a family for 3 years in China. So I learned a lot about how to operate in another country and what it means to learn another language, to adapt to a different culture, to adapt to different food and climate. And as a result, I've got quite a great deal of empathy for our international students who make those same adjustments when they come and study internationally. And often they will come to me and, they'll apologize for their standard of English and in trying to frame a question. And I just say to them, stop. Do not apologize because your level of English is not as much as proficient as you would like it. What that means is that you can speak more than one language. And the fact that you're undertaking academic work in a second language, I think that's amazing, and you're absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. And that just puts the biggest smile on their face, because what they've overcome in order to be able to do that is extraordinary. And I tell them that, look, I know Mandarin, I can speak Mandarin, and I can speak Greek, but I could not undertake academic study in either of those languages. Mm-hmm. And so once you kind of look at it from their shoes and their perspective, you gain a rapport with them, and you've got them, and they're quite comfortable then in coming and asking questions and, working that relationship. But it's because you understand where they're coming from and the difficulties and challenges that they're facing. So if you can convey that and build a rapport with those students, then their learning just increases enormously. So it's incredibly important, and also to convey to the domestic students why they might be thinking the way they think, and their reticence, for example, in asking questions in class. And when you explain that that's for cultural reasons, and that they very much regard asking questions as disrupting the harmony of the classroom, whereas our domestic students would not hesitate to do that. So when you explain it that it's for cultural reasons, the domestic students have a lot to learn and have as much to learn from our international students as our international students have to learn about the way things are done in a more Western and individualist country such as Australia. So there's definitely so much to be gained by having the different cultures in the classroom.
Yes. Yes, Doctor?
Yes, and any other queries or questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I
You're
would like
welcome.
to suggest about the social theory of Bourdieu, but you don't use this theory in this research paper.
No, and Bourdieu with his social capitals and cultural capitals, I do mention it briefly in the paper, and we talk about its relationship, but we focused on cultural intelligence as the framework in this particular study. I think often attempting to publish papers that combine too many theories can get quite complex, and it really slows them down in the review process. And a lot of reviewers will tend to suggest that you focus on one particular theory to frame your research. So that's what we did, although we acknowledge Bourdieu and the social and cultural capitals of his studies in the paper.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that you have done very well with answering a lot of questions, dear Dr. Meredith. So thank you very much. So all that remains for me to say is thank you everyone that's joined us, and I thank you very much for taking the time out to present to us today, Dr. Meredith. It's be really appreciated. Bye.
Oh, thank you. It's my absolute pleasure, and thank you for your very, very kind invitation.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Dr. Meredith, and all my colleagues. And I hope to organize another seminar soon with you.
Oh, that would be fabulous. And I would, as you mentioned in the opening, I am the convener of the Accounting Educators Conference at RMIT, and we hold that every year in November, except not this year because of COVID. But going forward beyond 2020, it would be lovely if some of you were able to make it to RMIT in November to attend that. It's an amazing conference and a fantastic opportunity to network with accounting academics and academics in general who are very passionate about education and research in that space.
Thank you very much, dear doctors. I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Meredith, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will upload a copy of the slides in the chat box as well. So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Meredith.
والشكر موصول للدكتور محمد